To have a little fun, our summer Sabre prospect primer, joined by Hadi Kalakeche. Let's get into it. The draft picks, the trade this offseason we saw, and who might be coming up to the Buffalo team soon. All that ahead with Hadi Kalakeche on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Be sure to check us out on YouTube, especially thanks if you're making us your first listen in the middle of August. Because, of course, there's not a ton going on with hockey these days. Well, we did get some offer sheets this week. So glad that you were able to join us today on the show. Sneaky Joe DiBiase, joined by Hadi Kalakeche on today's show. Dober prospects, Locked On NHL prospects, a lot to get to. How's your summer going, Hadi? Thanks for coming on with us.
Thanks for having me. It's been busy. This has been a long time coming, but I've had just way too much going on the last couple of weeks. The off season's kind of for NHL podcasts and NHL fans and NHL teams. It's pretty quiet unless you're kind of really focusing on the free agency. Everything on the scouting world just going. I mean, just full on 100%. It's. I just came back from Edmonton, watched the hockey tournament there, the Helenius Gretzky Cup. So nice. I'm excited to talk prospects.
Yeah, how did that go? Does that have you been to that tournament before?
No, first time. And
okay.
It was special. Like there were some great storylines. Adam Bannock almost got his revenge against Team Canada in the finals. Czechia's looking really good these past two tournaments. He's looking like a really good pick. Matt Savoie might just be one of the best defensemen I've ever personally scouted. Like he's fantastic.
Wow. All right.
So yeah, it's looking like an exciting draft.
Awesome. You were in Edmonton. Was there any did you catch any stray conversations about the week that they had hockey-wise? Because the two offer sheets in one day, I mean, they happened at the same time. I mean, I don't know when the last offer sheet was before you had those two, and maybe it was a couple of years.
I mean, it's unfortunate that I left, I think, 2 days before those offer sheets got put in. So I didn't get to have any conversations about that. But it's special. It's one of the first times we've ever seen two offer sheets to the same organization by the same organization.
Yeah.
And overall, from what I understand, the Blues were targeting Holloway and Broberg and a trade offer for Buchnevich.
Yeah.
I think Elliot Friedman put that out. So it's just really funny that they didn't get them in the trade. So let's go and offer sheet them, which is
and take advantage of Edmonton, who we'll get to. I have a little bit to get to about them because Sabres made a trade that's prospect related with them this offseason, but they're up against the cap. It's why they made that trade with the Sabres earlier in the offseason, and it's why the Blues, I think, also think they could take advantage of the situation is, hey, we're going to bet you can't pay $6 million, $7 million even to these two players in the next 2 years. Guys that really haven't even fully established themselves yet in the NHL, but probably are about to. So, all right, we'll get to a little bit on the Oilers. A lot to get to today. Konsta Helenius, I want to ask you about him and what he means to the Sabres organization and just kind of the chatter we've had around him in the past month or two. Get to some of the other first-round prospects. Jiri Kulich, Isaac Rozan, Noah Ostlund. There's a lot of guys now that I think Sabre fans are wondering, what's the timeline? How close are we to these guys getting to the NHL level? But let's start with that trade that happened between the Sabres and the Oilers this offseason. Before they had Holloway and Broberg offer sheeted, they trade Ryan McLeod to the Buffalo Sabres in part from their vantage point for, I think, two good reasons. One is that was going to be a little bit of money after next year, and they're already up against the cap. They've got McDavid to pay. They've got Draisaitl to pay at some point here soon. And the Sabres needed a third-line center. My question to you, having your background in scouting and really digging in on these prospects, was your reaction to that trade and where you stand now the same that mine was and a lot of Sabre fans, which was, oh, that player cost you Matt Savoie? So just kind of where you think Savoie's value is and whether, you would have expected the Sabres to do better trading away a prospect of that caliber.
I think so. Yeah, I think that there's definitely more they could have acquired for what they were trying to find. I mean, Ryan McLeod's a great kind of middle six defensive face-off winning center. Sorry.
Sure.
But yeah, overall, I think that Matt Savoie has, in reality, we're talking about kind of perceived value versus probably where Matt Savoie ends up as a player. I think Matt Savoie probably ends up as a player being very, very similar in value and in position in the lineup as Ryan McLeod will. But usually still those prospects do get you more. You know, he had a great season in the WHL. But the way I see it is there's probably one team out there that still thinks he's a top six center, not a middle six center. You probably could have gotten a bit more, you know, a similar player value to Ryan McLeod plus a pick, something like that. I was really surprised with the low return when I heard it was 1-for-1.
Yeah.
I thought there's got to be a team out there that's going to give you more. But I think the Sabres are really targeting Ryan McLeod. We're really trying to bolster their middle six, have a center who can win faceoffs, play the PK, play defensive games. And, you know, the Ryan McLeod did for Edmonton this season were fantastic. He was a key part in them getting to the playoffs. He's one of the fastest players in the NHL. He's got a lot of value in a lot of different areas. He's just, I mean, I don't ever see him playing full time on a second line, not if the Sabres prospect develops the way it does. So,
yeah.
For your future third line center, I don't know.
Yeah, was a big part of why, you know, I guess where I ended up. And if you're trying to take the positive end of things, like, okay, they definitely gave up too much. I don't know that anybody really is even arguing the other side of that. You definitely gave up too much, but this prospect pool with the Sabres was littered with forward prospects that were drafted in the first round that even had similar size, stature, styles, maybe a little bit to what you had in Savoie. So what would you say to that person that says, okay, I can swallow this trade and not throw up because I've got 4 other guys that I feel relatively good about?
Fully agreed. And I think, you know, we've had this conversation a couple times before already about Matt Savoie. I don't think he was the best prospect in the Sabres pool. I think he was maybe one of the prospects that teams would look at and go, okay, we're willing to have him in a trade. But the size factor kind of bumps down his value a tiny bit. But, you know, I'm not one that really looks at size. I have more other concerns with Matt Savoie, which is why when we talked about the Kulich, Savoie, Ostlund trio, add Savoie at the bottom of that. I think that really hasn't changed. Jiri Kulich's developing fantastically. Noah Ostlund's only added to his already stacked toolkit. Matt Savoie stayed relatively the same. He's kind of upped the pace a tiny bit on his game, but hasn't really added any new tools. Hasn't really kind of progressed his game in key, meaningful ways. So I understand the Sabres going, we're willing to part with this guy because we have similar prospects in the pool who are developing, are showing signs of progress. Whereas Savoie, all he did was mature physically, up the pace a tiny bit, but he didn't add anything to his toolkit.
Yeah, I think maybe this kind of plateaued his value a little bit, or maybe not. Like we don't know how it would have gone, but it did sound to me like the Sabres planned on him playing in the NHL this year because they knew, okay, he's too good for juniors. He's not eligible yet to play in the AHL. I think they wanted him to play in the NHL, but he got hurt at the beginning of training camp last year. And then, oh, look, Zach Benson was ready to play in the NHL. And I don't think they anticipated that. And once you arrived at, well, we can't not put Benson in, and we can't put 2 19-year-olds in our lineup in the bottom 6 when we're trying to win. I think the Benson factor kind of complicated this a little bit. So, again, that's not to say Savoie automatically would have done great in the NHL, but I guess just your take kind of on that as circumstance for Savoie, and 2, Benson kind of grabbing that NHL job and where you see Benson going forward a little bit. Because I don't really even count him when I ask you about, like, hey, who are their best guys in the pipeline? Because he's already here, but, I mean, he's younger than them all. I think he still should qualify in some respect as a prospect.
Yeah, for sure. The way I see it with Benson is, name me a thing that Benson does, that Savoie does that Benson can't do. And I'll give you $20. On top of that, I can name you 5, 6, 7 things that Benson can do that Savoie can't. So what they got in Zach Benson sliding to them in the 2023 draft was essentially a better, more improved, more intense, more capable, more intelligent Matt Savoie. The way they play, the way they approach a game, relatively similar. Benson's a lot more intense, a lot more capable, and there's a reason why he's played in the NHL from the rip, off rip, whereas Matt Savoie took some time to develop and progress, right? So sorry, give me a second. My cat is
No, you're good. I like it's kind of good background noise. I kind of like it.
Fantastic. Yeah, she just once she eats, she goes a little crazy. Anyway, so yeah, overall, I think that what Zach Benson's brought to the Sabres team is something that's going to have lasting effects on how they move forward. Zach Benson, for me, is a top 6 forward for sure. He's already shown flashes of playmaking, flashes of skill in the NHL that show that he's able to adapt his game and work around his lack of true high-end foot speed. Because usually when you're a 5'10" center, you need to be a high-end center. You need to be a high-end skater, right? Benson is certainly not that. But he's capable of adapting his game and kind of molding what he does normally around new situations, new circumstances to overcome hurdles, which is something that I haven't seen from Matt Savoie so far.
Sure. That's what, to me, was almost the most incredible part of Benson's season for someone that watched every game, every shift he played all year, was he's not fast. Like, I think maybe a lot of fans expected, 5'9", skilled forward that's 18 comes in the lineup. You're probably expecting him to be like one of the fastest guys on the team. And he definitely isn't, not even close. In fact, I think they have the NHL edge stats now. And if you looked at like 20-mile-per-hour speed bursts on the team, I think him and Jeff Skinner were the only Sabres that didn't have one. Like, it wasn't there. And he still somehow managed to earn penalty kill to ice time. He got a little bit in at the power play at the end. And now, like, I think it's him versus Jason Zucker to be in their top 6 next year. And that shouldn't be that hard a bar to clear. That's, by the way, if the Sabres don't make some line A trade or something else, which I guess could happen. But you never know. But Benson just was so impressed by what he did, even without the speed or, of course, the size. Because obviously, at this point, he's not going to get much taller. I'm assuming he'll get more muscular. He was 160 pounds. Super impressive player in year one. How surprised were you, I guess, that he did make it? I feel like a lot of prospect guys were not like, he's 13th overall. So in some respect, yes, but no one ever came to me with like, oh, this is nuts that he made the league and played all season.
Yeah, I mean, if you asked me in May or June before the draft, does Zach Benson play in the NHL?
Yeah.
In his first year, I would have said no, but I wouldn't have been perfectly sure of that because of how good of an off-puck thinker he is. And that's the thing when you're kind of an undersized player with lower end foot speed. The only way to make it work in the NHL is to be an elite off-puck thinker, and that's exactly what Zach Benson is. So that's probably the response I would have given you in May, June. Is I don't think so, but at the same time, if it happens, it's because he's an off-puck thinker. It's
because what he's good at. What his that's that trait that he has. You could see it. You could see it on the ice for sure. Time out here. When we come back, we'll get Hadi's thoughts on Konsta Helenius, the new Buffalo Sabre first-round pick from this offseason, who is also getting some rave reviews about NHL readiness and where his timeline could be and where he stands in the Sabres prospect pool. So what Hadi thinks of this most recent first-round pick by the Sabres, and then we'll get a little bit in on some of the other guys that are at the top of the prospect ranks for the Buffalo Sabres. That's coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented here on the show by FanDuel Sportsbook. Of course, you've had baseball going for a while, but you've got NFL preseason going right now. If you need a rooting interest for your team, the Bills play tonight here if you're listening on a Saturday, and you can throw some action down at FanDuel Sportsbook. FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. Something for everybody, every day, all summer long. Soccer fans, you too, because Premier League just got rolling, and I've already jumped in on that train. So head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, we are joined on today's show by Hadi Kalakeche of the Locked On NHL Prospects podcast, as well as Dober Prospects. And we enter into the summer months here, training camp in about a month, and then we'll start rolling towards the regular season. It's under 50 days until the Sabres open the year overseas in Czechia against the New Jersey Devils. So let's get to their draft pick. Konsta Helenius, first-round pick. Kind of simply put, what did you think of him falling to 14, was that good value for the Buffalo Sabres? And is this a player that you liked coming into the draft and how he kind of fits into the Sabres pool?
For me, Consta Helenius was the best defensive forward in the draft. I'm very surprised that Jet Luchenko got picked ahead of him because they play similar games, they approach the game similarly, but Helenius is so much more cerebral, so much more mature. He put up almost a point a game on essentially the top line of a Finnish Liga team, a Finnish men's team,
right,
the entire season, which isn't an easy feat. It's not something we see often. It's the type of situation we've seen before with maybe Michael Granlund, Patrick Laine, Jesse Puljujärvi. Those guys are the guys that tend to play top 6 minutes on a Finnish men's team and produce. Helenius is 5'11", 187 pounds. Is by no means a very physically inclined player that would be able to rely on that to make it work. So what he's been doing all year is just outthinking everyone offensively, defensively, in transition. His brain is just really, really, really refined. So I had him in my kind of 8 to 12 range in this draft. So to see him slip to 14 first was surprising, and second was a result of a lot of teams making weird decisions. I think that Helenius should have been a top 10 pick. Just fantastic value here at 14.
Yeah, point per game, by the way, in the playoffs as well. What is he like? We just talked about Benson, how like his hockey IQ and his off puck sense is so elite. When it comes to Helenius, like what are the skills that kind of jump off the page for you? You mentioned defensively. Do you think offensively he has traits that will translate the offensive game to the NHL level?
Certainly, the way he processes a game offensively is really, really good. I think the way that he kind of draws players in and opens up passing lanes. He's mainly a playmaker. I'd say that's kind of the main trait offensively. That's a concern that kept him out of kind of the top 10 conversation most of the year for a lot of people. It's where's the skill set? Where's the offensive refinement? Everything he does offensively is good, but not great. But you look at his playmaking and the way it combines with his hockey sense and his brain. It's already miles ahead of a lot of prospects at his age. My question with that is he just ahead in his development, or does he have room to improve that even further? Because puck skills usually are pretty static unless you work really hard on them, and teams rarely tell you to just take shots for 2-3 hours, in training, right? So
yeah.
It's a matter of how much he's going to improve these things, but overall, I think that he's smart enough to make it work. He makes really, really, really good decisions. I think that's kind of the cornerstone of his game. He doesn't make bad decisions. He's perfectly positioned almost all the time. He's got to stick in the right lanes, and offensively, that shows as well.
Is he, last on him, one, actually two-part, is he definitely in your eyes a center at the NHL level? And two, is it too far of a leap? I know because it just happened last year. It almost feels like I kind of got to ask the question. And, this has been talked about a little bit in Sabre circles, not too much. I don't know. What odds would you put on him shocking the Sabres at training camp and doing the same thing Zach Benson did, where he at least gets the 9 games at the beginning of the year? Well, I guess not 9 games, right? Because he's not a junior player. So for him, maybe the rules would be different. But anyways.
As long as he's signed, he can play anywhere in the system. I think he gets loaned back to Liga. I'm not sure, though. I feel the same way I felt in May, June when I was talking about Zach Benson, right? In May, June of 2023, this is exact feeling I had with Consta Helenius. Is I don't think he makes it, but if he does, wouldn't shock me at all. He's one of the most mature players in this draft, one of the most refined offensive toolkits. Him and Michael Brunswick-Nygård are the only two that last year I saw a couple games where I thought this kid could play in the NHL right away. So I wouldn't be shocked at all to see him make it. I'm just not sold on that being a real possibility.
Yeah, the Sabres signed him to his entry-level deal, so he could play for Rochester this year in the AHL too. So we'll see what they end up wanting to do on that front. All right, a quick roundabout through the other Sabre prospects when we come back with Hadi, Kalakeche, Locked On NHL prospects, as well as Dober prospects. Some of the first-round picks, Isaac Rozan, whether it's Jiri Kulich, Noah Ostlund, who Hadi's big on. What are we looking at for those three? Because right now, with Matt Savoie out, those are the top three. And like Hadi said, he had some of those guys above Savoie in the first place. That coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, whether it's superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Speed, power, style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with the eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive. ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Final segment, Locked On Sabres podcast, Prospect Primer in the middle of the summer here. Why not? Hadi, Kalakeche, Locked On NHL Prospects. All right, we talked a lot about Helenius. We talked a lot about, by the way, Helenius. We're still trying to figure that out because he said one thing, but then he, I think, also said another. But that's how it goes. Hockey prospects, when they first show up, I think it was Henrik Talander for like 4 years until he corrected everybody. So you never know. And that'll be the case with some of these guys we're about to talk about. I still don't know what we're doing with Isak Rosen. It was Rosen a month ago. It was Rosine 2 months ago. It always changing. But anyways, some of these guys, Hadi, that have been playing in Rochester, some of these guys that have been playing overseas. I want to start with the guy that you consistently talk up and get me excited about. And he's not someone I've seen a lot of because he's yet to really play over in North America. He's only practiced, I think, mostly with Rochester. Noah Ostlund, where you see his current trajectory as a player, I would say likely he's going to play this season for the Amerks in the AHL. Maybe he gets called up along the way as the season goes, but how has he developed in your eyes, and especially the last year, when I remember you, I think for the first time, told me you thought he was like their best forward prospect that was in the system?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that's changed for me. And I might be biased. Well, I mean, I think Kulich might have edged him out slightly, but that's no slouch. That's no slack on Ostlund. It's just how much Jiri Kulich has developed.
Sure.
But what's really interesting with Ostlund is he went from kind of a real focused, playmaking oriented player to really kind of honing his shooting skill and becoming a really good, down low goal scorer. He really kind of honed in on that skill set and improved his ability to elevate pucks in tight, to shoot in motion, to shoot from a standstill as well. Had a couple one-timers this year. I was really impressed with the progression in his shooting game, and I don't want that to come at the detriment of his playmaking game. I still think his playmaking could kind of progress and develop in kind of natural ways. But it's interesting to see a player join a different team and go, I'm going to be a goal scorer. I like that. I like the ability to just kind of decide what kind of game you're going to play that day. And it makes him really unpredictable, really difficult to handle for opposing teams because he'd never know what he's going to do. He's still as shifty and as elusive and as intelligent as he was in his draft year. Those parts of his game haven't changed and, in fact, have just gotten better with time. I'm really excited about what Noah Ostlund could do in the NHL. I think he's going to be a great kind of playmaking, play-driving center. He can play wing, he can play center. With the amount of center depth that the Sabres have, I wouldn't be surprised if either him or Benson or Helenius down the line play on the wing. But I like his chances of being a top sixer.
Yeah, they have a surplus. So I'm actually... Keep this on the back of your mind when you're thinking about the Sabres for this. I continue to wonder if Dylan Cousins has a future on the wing because last year just didn't go well. And every time he goes to play for Team Canada at the World Championships, I know it's the World Championships, you don't want to take too much from it, but every time he goes there, he plays the wing and it goes really, really well. So yes, if there's a day in the future where the Sabres go, we've got all these centers that are arriving on our shores at the NHL level, I do wonder if Cousins might be the guy that could take that switch. But it's, center to wing's also easier. What about Jiri Kulich and his season, 27 goals in 57 games for the Amerks last year? Yeah. Would it almost be disappointing to you if he didn't start the year in Buffalo? Like, I kind of think he will. Maybe it'll be close. But it just feels like naturally, doesn't it kind of feel like he's done everything at the AHL that he could do?
Yeah. I think the only problem with that is where does he play? there isn't a lot, and that's the difficulty when you're such a good drafting team and you're starting to develop players really well. You start running out of spots to put them, and I think that with Kulich, he's done everything he needed to in the AHL. I don't think I don't think he has much to learn in the AHL. I think he should be playing in the NHL, but the question is where. On a if he plays on a line or a third line full time, play some PK minutes, play some second power play minutes, fantastic, great, good for him. If he's stuck on a fourth line, it's not going to be good any better for his development than just dominating the AHL. So, sure. as a matter of progression and development, I think that Kulich is better off playing wherever he can have consistent, reliable, and confidence building minutes. And if he's playing fourth line, I'd rather him play in the AHL.
Yeah, I bet. I think you're absolutely right on that. My guess would be the Sabres know that too, and I think their fourth line is kind of set. They've invested a lot in it in the offseason. I bet it's middle six winger or Rochester for him to start the year. If Benson is in the top six, then maybe Kulich's on their third line with McLeod and with Jordan Greenway or something like that. Playing 15 minutes a night. That might be my guess. So we'll see on him. And then finally, I don't know, where are we at on Isaac Rosen as a prospect? Because am I jumping too far with this as a take? Because it's a player that I watch some of throughout the year, but I'm not watching every Rochester game. But I don't know, Hadi, I see a guy that's had 3 years of development since he's been drafted. I start to feel like, hey, if you're not making the NHL club going into year 4, I'm going to start thinking you're not someone that's going to be a big impact player in the future.
For sure. I think that this is kind of a really marquee year for him. I mean, he did just come off of a 50-point season in 67 games in Rochester. So he's been playing really well. Overall, still a playmaking leaning scoring winger, which is very strange to say. Like he's a goal scoring winger in terms of his tools, but then he over delegates. He makes a lot of passes where he should shoot and that kind of stuff. He's a shooter without a shooter's mindset. So you have two options with that. Either help him develop that shooter's mindset in the AHL, have him shoot everything on the net, or you progress his playmaking game and make him a playmaker. Overall, I think that with what he's developed in Rochester, I'm just not sure what he is so far. Usually by this year, you've developed your identity as a prospect. I mean, yes, he is 21, but by 21, you have a pretty good idea of who you are and what you're going to be. And from what I've seen with Rosen, I don't think he's developed an identity as a player yet, and that's kind of difficult. It's difficult for teams to put him in their lineup if he hasn't figured out who he's going to be in the NHL. So that's a difficult kind of conversation to have with him. But I think if he doesn't develop an identity over the next year or two, it's going to affect his draft stock. It's going to affect his not his draft stock, his trade stock. Because it's the same that happened, for example, with the prospect from the Habs pool that I was huge on, Jesse Ylönen, who was speedy, was dynamic, but never developed an identity. And then he's basically doing the shuttle between the NHL and the NHL time. So, yeah, basically that's kind of the problem there. Is if you don't develop an identity, NHL teams don't know what to do with you.
Sure. Right, exactly. Finally, just before we let you go, Hadi, anybody that we didn't kind of open-ended, we didn't mention that's in the Sabres pool that you think is worthy of, got to bring them up if we're going to talk prospects about the Sabres, somebody that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, just because the draft is fresh on my mind. Adam Kleber, Brody Zimmer, Luke Osborne, and Ryerson Leanders, I think were fantastic pickups where they were picked in the 2024 draft. Kleber especially, I think that he's added so much to his game in the kind of final stretch of the season. Massive right shot defenseman who shuts down everything. And Luke Osborne's been a big favorite of mine. I put out a whole video on him back in like February, March, because I spotted his skill set and went, this might be a gem in the draft. He's a boomer bust prospect. I like his chances of booming though. And Ryerson Leanders for me was for the longest time the best goaltender in the draft. And to pick him up in the 7th round sounds really familiar, doesn't it, Joe?
What happened there that he fell to the 7th then? If he was at one point the top guy,
small.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that makes sense. Nothing on Patrick Geary. I only ask because he's my buddy at work's cousin, local kid. But late round pick. Let's see. They gotta hope that he can get there. It'd be a really cool story if Jiri can get there.
Yeah, I don't have much on him.
No, it's fine. That's fine. We'll see. We'll see what we get from him too. I'm rooting for him hard. All right, man. What else you got planned this summer? You going to any other hockey tournaments in any destination locations?
Might be at the Summer Showcase. Might be well, not the Summer Showcase. The Five Nations. I haven't really seen about that yet. There's a Fall Classic as well. Almost definitely going to be going to the World Junior, so that's for sure.
Love that. Awesome. Where are the World Juniors this year again? Top of my head.
Ottawa.
They're in Ottawa. All right, cool.
Not too far.
Yeah, not too far at all. All right. Hadi, Kalakeche, great stuff. Locked on NHL prospects, Dober prospects as well. Always appreciate you taking some time out for us, man. We could talk Sabre prospects for another hour, but we'll let you go here and appreciate the time. We'll talk soon.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
That's going to do it for us today here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We'll keep rolling through the division as we continue to compare and contrast Sabres to their division rivals. Next up, the Toronto Maple Leafs. We'll talk about that on Monday. Talk to you then here in the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.